There's something a man never forgets. Not the sound of a gunshot, not the smell of burning wood, not even the face of the man he killed. It's the sound of a woman breathing on the other side of a thin wall, in the dark. Both of you awake, neither one moving. I lay there that night, my left arm wrapped in rough cloth, blood still seeping through the bandage, staring at the ceiling of a room that smelled like old smoke and older regrets. And I thought to myself, she knows. She knew from the first day, and she still opened the door. Now, you want to know what kind of man steps into another man's grief and calls it his own salvation? The worst kind. The kind that doesn't even see what he's doing. Let me take you back, 3 days before that night, to a dying town called Red Hollow, and to the moment I made the first in a long chain of decisions I still don't know were right. Red Hollow wasn't on any map worth trusting. It sat out there in the high desert like something God had started building and then lost interest. Cracked earth, sage and dust. The kind of place where the wind comes through at dusk, smelling like rust and distance. I rode in from the west on a roan mare named Nothing. I never named horses, learned that lesson the hard way. And she was limping, left rear. The hoof had split sometime that morning, probably on the shale flats outside of Mesquite. The tendon was starting to swell. I gave her 2 more days before she'd be done. 2 days. Same as me, most likely. 3 coins in my pocket. 1 bullet left after the other 2. Well, that's a different story. A Colt Navy with a worn firing pin and a grip wrapped in rawhide where the wood used to be. I wasn't running from anything in particular. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The truth is, a man who's lost everything doesn't run toward things anymore. He just moves. One town to the next, one sunrise to the next, hoping that somewhere in the forward motion, the weight of what he's done gets left behind. It never does, but you keep moving anyway. The first man I met in Red Hollow was an old-timer named Hector. Ran the livery stable at the edge of town, a lean-to of a building, half the roof caved in, but the stalls were clean and the water trough was full. He looked at my mare's hoof without being asked. Didn't say anything for a long moment, just clicked his teeth. "Arroyo to the east has water," he finally said, "but don't drink it yourself. Salt. Bad kind." I nodded. A man who volunteers useful information to a stranger without wanting something in return. That's a rare creature out here. I didn't realize yet just how rare Hector was, or how much that would matter later. I paid him 1 of my 3 coins for a stall and a handful of oats. He didn't argue about the price. "You passing through?" he asked. "Aren't I always?" I said. He looked at me the way old men look at younger ones who think they're being clever, like they've heard it all before and none of it impressed them the first time. I found the saloon by accident, went around back looking for a shortcut to the main street, and stepped through a door that wasn't quite latched shut. What I found inside wasn't what I expected. She was on her knees when I walked in. Lila Voss. Though I didn't know her name yet. Dark hair, worn dress the color of old wine. And she was scrubbing blood off the floorboards with a kind of focused, quiet efficiency that told me this wasn't the first time she'd done it. She didn't scream when she heard me, didn't reach for anything. She just looked up. That look wasn't surprise, wasn't fear, just recognition. Like she'd been waiting on someone to finally come through that door. far corner, I heard the hammer of a shotgun click back. "Hands," said a voice. I raised them. The woman holding the gun was younger, sharper-faced. Auburn hair pinned back loose, green eyes that didn't blink. A sawed-off shotgun held level at my sternum, not shaking, not wavering. The grip of someone who'd pointed it at people before and had reasons not to feel bad about it afterward. That was Cora Blaine. I'd find out much later that approximately 1 year before this moment, Cora had followed me to Tucson, had watched me for 3 days through a rifle scope, and had decided not to pull the trigger. I didn't know that then. I stood there with my hands up, looking at 2 women I'd never met, in a room that smelled like lye soap and old blood. "I'm just looking for a back way to the street," I said. "You found the wrong back way," Cora said. Lila stood up slowly, wiped her hands on her apron, looked at me with those dark, measuring eyes. And then the door burst open from the front. A boy came through, 10 years old maybe, small for his age, face pale under a layer of trail dust. He dropped to his knees and started drawing on the floorboards with a piece of chalk he pulled from his pocket. A star, a building, an arrow pointing at us. "That's Sammy," Lila said quietly. "He doesn't speak." She didn't explain why. She didn't have to. The chalk star meant the sheriff. The arrow meant he was coming here. And right then, the front doors of the saloon opened, and a man in a clean suit walked in like he owned the place. Because he was trying to. Drayton didn't look like a villain. That was the most dangerous thing about him. He was 50, maybe 55, silver at the temples, a lawyer at his elbow, a folded document in his hand, and the kind of smile that people use when they've already won and just want you to know it before they collect. He looked at Lila the way certain men look at things they've decided belong to them. Then he looked at me. "Friend of the ladies?" I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was the boy with the chalk drawing on the floor. Maybe it was the blood on the floorboards and the woman who'd cleaned it without complaint. Maybe I was just too tired to be smart. "I'm the husband of one of them," I said. The room went quiet enough to hear the flies. Drayton's lawyer looked up from his document. Cora's jaw tightened. Lila didn't move at all, which somehow was the loudest thing in the room. Drayton smiled a little wider. "Well then," he said, "you'll want to see this." He handed the document to his lawyer, who laid it on the bar between us. Territorial statutes. Unmarried women couldn't hold commercial property title in an unincorporated settlement. It was all there. Clean, legal, documented. Drayton wasn't breaking any laws. He was hiding behind them. "You have 48 hours, he said pleasantly, to produce a marriage record, or vacate the premises." He nodded to the sheriff, who'd stood through all of this with his hand near his gun and his eyes on the middle distance, the way men do when they've been bought but don't want to look like it. Then Drayton walked out. The door swung shut behind him. I looked at Lila. She was looking at the document on the bar. "There's no marriage record," she said, not asking me, just stating the facts of her situation out loud, the way people do when they're deciding whether to fight or surrender. "No," I said, "but he doesn't know that yet." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, something moved through those dark eyes that I couldn't read. I should have asked what it was. I didn't. You'd think that was the moment I made my choice. It wasn't. The choice came later that night, when they came to take it by force. I knew Drayton wouldn't wait 48 hours. Men like that don't use deadlines to be patient. They use them to look civilized while their hands do the dirty work in the dark. We had 3 hours before sundown. I walked the building twice, every entrance, every angle, every shadow that would hide a man with bad intentions. 5 ways in, not enough of us to cover all of them. So we don't cover them, I told Cora. We funnel them. She understood immediately. That was the thing about Cora. She thought tactically, the way people do when survival hasn't always been guaranteed. We set a tripwire of rope at ankle height across the back door, tied to a heavy oak table. A metal bucket suspended above the side window by a single cord. Pull the board, the bucket falls. 3 empty whiskey casks stacked at the rear entrance, not to block, to make noise. Lila checked her Derringer, a Bond Arms, 2 barrels, .41 caliber, small as a lady's hand. Accurate up to about 10 steps. She loaded it without looking down. Sammy went into the cellar. I handed him a candle, a box of matches, and a bone whistle. Glass breaks. You blow this, hard as you can. He looked at me, took the whistle, nodded once. I put the cellar door shut and slid the iron bolt home. Midnight came without a moon. The back door cask toppled first. I was already in position. The first man through tripped the rope, pulled the table across 6 feet of floor, sounded like a cannon. I crossed the room in 4 steps and put the grip of my Colt across the back of his skull. He went down. The second one didn't bother with stealth. He fired through the door before he opened it, twice, blind, into the dark. The first shot split the door frame. The second buried itself in the wall 6 inches from my head. I heard it pass. There's a sound a bullet makes when it's that close. Not what you'd expect, not loud. It's almost polite, a whisper. And then the wood splinters, and you realize how thin the line is. I fired my first shot at the oil lamp above him. The glass burst. Hot oil rained down across his shoulders. He screamed, clawed at his face. I moved through the smoke and put him down with an elbow to the temple. 2. 1 shot left in the Navy. The third man came in through the front, big, unhurried, carrying a lit torch in one hand and a Remington in the other. He saw Lila behind the bar, and his face did something ugly. Step aside, little girl. She shot him. 7 steps, clean pull. The .41 went through his right shoulder at a downward angle, shattered the joint, dropped the Remington, sent the torch skittering across the floor in a shower of sparks. He made a sound I won't describe. I stamped out the torch, kicked the Remington under the bar. Lila stood with the second barrel still loaded. She was looking at the man on the floor. Her hand wasn't shaking, but she had that look afterward. The one you get when you've crossed a line you can't step back over. Maybe not her first time, hard to say. The fourth man came over the roof. Cora was waiting. She fired 1 shell of the sawed-off at the edge of the roofline, 2 feet ahead of where he stood. Tiles exploded. Shrapnel caught him across the face. He went off the edge, 4 meters down into the alley. The crack of his leg when he landed carried through the night air like a branch breaking. Cora looked down at him from the roof's edge, reloaded, watched until he stopped trying to stand. Then there was the fifth. I heard him before I saw him. Slow footsteps, deliberate. The footsteps of a man who'd heard everything that just happened inside and was still walking toward it. He came through the side window, had already dismantled the board and bucket from outside before entering. He knew about the trap. We looked at each other across the dark room. He fired first. The bullet opened a line across my left bicep, not deep, but deep enough. The impact spun me half around. I caught the wall with my right hand, stayed up. He was already chambering the next round. I fired my last shot. 10 steps, no light. My arm was on fire. The bullet took him in the right thigh. He went down hard. His gun skittered across the floor. I reached it before he did and kicked it into the corner. He looked up at me, breathing through his teeth. "Tell Drayton," I said, "to come himself next time." 18 minutes, 5 men, not one of them dead, which meant Drayton still had no blood on his hands, no law reaching toward him. But every one of them would need a doctor. I dragged them out one by one and left them in front of the sheriff's office. Tied a note to the first man's coat collar. Property of Drayton, returned intact. No signature. When I walked back to the saloon, Lila was standing in the doorway. She looked at my arm, then at my face. She didn't say anything. She just stepped aside and let me in. The wound needed cleaning. That's how it started. Cora took Sammy upstairs, door closed. Quiet settled over the saloon like something heavy being put down. Lila poured 2 glasses of whiskey, pushed one across the bar without a word. We drank, didn't clink glasses. That felt right. She moved to the back room, left the door half open. I followed because she hadn't told me not to. Small room, 1 table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed against the wall, a single oil lamp that turned everything amber and slow. She opened a tin box, took out cloth and carbolic. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She pulled her chair close, lifted my left hand and rested it on her knee, careful, both hands wrapped around my wrist, turning it to see the wound in the lamplight. The carbolic stung. I didn't move. Her fingers were cool, steady, moving with a precision that had nothing to do with gentleness and everything to do with competence. She'd done this before. The lamplight caught the line of her jaw, the curve of her collarbone above the open neck of her dress. The way her hair had come loose on one side, and she hadn't bothered to fix it. She stopped wrapping, both hands resting on mine, still. The room had a weight to it, the kind of weight that accumulates over 3 days of shared danger and close quarters and all the things 2 people don't say to each other. She looked up, and that was the moment, the exact moment, where the distance between 2 people stops being distance, where it becomes pressure, something with a temperature, something you can feel against your skin without being touched. I leaned forward. She didn't lean back. The lamp threw our shadows long across the wall, close together, nearly overlapping. And then she said it, soft, almost a whisper, like something she'd rehearsed 10,000 times and still wasn't sure she could say out loud. "I knew who you were the first day." I went still. "The land deed, your signature." She wasn't looking at my arm anymore. She was looking at the middle distance, somewhere between me and the wall. "I've been carrying that paper for 10 years. The lamp hissed. Somewhere outside, a horse shifted in its stall. I said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. "My father died 2 years after we lost the land." She stood up, walked to the window, stood with her back to me, looking out at the dark. I kept thinking, when I found you, I'd know what to do. She turned, looked at me directly for the first time since she'd said his name. "But then you ran into a burning building to save a horse. And I don't know what to do with that." She left the room. I sat in the dark for a long time. My arm ached. The carbolic smell was sharp and clean. The lamp guttered once, then steadied. I thought about a man I used to be. One who carried a legal document and told himself it wasn't cruelty, it was business. One who watched a family lose everything and rode away without looking back. That man's ranch burned to the ground 6 months later. Drought, debt, everything gone. I used to think that was punishment. Sitting in that room, I started to think maybe it was just consequence. And consequence, unlike punishment, doesn't care whether you're sorry. Cora found me in the livery before sunrise. She didn't ease into it. "I had you in a rifle scope in Tucson," she said, 14 months ago, 3 days. She let that sit. "Lila told me not to." She looked at the roan in the stall, not at me. She said a man who carries guilt without putting a gun in his own mouth is a man still looking for somewhere to put it down. Was she right? I asked. Cora thought about it. "She usually is," she said. "I just hate it when she's right about things like this." She walked out. I spent the rest of that night at the table in the saloon with a lamp, a pen, and the original land deed, Lila's father's deed, the one she'd carried for 10 years. I wrote a new document, a transfer of title, my signature, 10 years backdated, witnessing the sale of the property to Lila Voss. Every word of it was a lie. Every word of it was the only thing I had left to give. Forgery. In 1892, in an unincorporated territory, that could mean a rope. I folded it, put it in my breast pocket, went outside and watched the sky begin to lighten in the east. Drayton came at first light, him, his lawyer, the sheriff, and 4 armed men. He'd done the arithmetic and decided that showing up in numbers was cleaner than what his first crew had attempted. I was standing in the middle of the street when they arrived. Lila stood to my left. Cora stood to my right, the sawed-off held loose at her side. Not raised, just present, like a fact. Drayton looked at the 3 of us, looked at my bandaged arm, did the math on how that had happened. His smile was thinner this time. "You're down to 1 move," he said. "So are you," I said. I took out the document and handed it to his lawyer, not to Drayton. That was deliberate. Lawyers care about evidence. Drayton only cared about winning. The lawyer read it. His expression shifted, the small, specific way a professional's face changes when they encounter a complication they weren't expecting. "A transfer of title," I said. 10 years old. The property was sold to Miss Voss before the territorial statute took effect. Your claim has no standing. "Witnesses?" Drayton said. Hector stepped out from the shadow of his burned livery. Then the woman from the dress shop. Then a man I didn't know, older, 1 arm, walking with a cane. Then 2 others, not a crowd, 6 people. But they stood still and they stood together. And in a place like Red Hollow, that meant something. Drayton looked at the document, looked at the witnesses, looked at the sheriff. The sheriff lowered his hand from his gun and took a small, careful step backward. The lawyer leaned toward Drayton and said something quietly. Drayton's jaw tightened. "This isn't over," Drayton said. "No," I agreed. "It's not." He turned. His men followed. And for the second time in 3 days, the sound of retreating boots on dry earth was the best sound I'd ever heard. Lila didn't say anything. She exhaled, slow and controlled, the way people do when they've been holding their breath for longer than they realized. Sammy appeared in the saloon doorway behind us. He was holding a piece of flat wood. He'd drawn something on it. He held it up. A man, a door. The door was open. That afternoon, I found Lila in the livery. She already knew about the document. "Forgery," she said, not accusing, just naming it. "Yes. You could hang for that." "Might," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "My father would have hated what you did." She picked up a brush and ran it along the roan's flank, slow, even strokes. He also would have poured you a drink. I took the roan out to the front of the stable and stood at the crossroads, west, the way I'd been heading, toward nothing in particular. Back toward the saloon, toward a boy who didn't speak, and two women who'd fought for something worth keeping, and a door that Sammy had drawn open. The roan turned her head toward the saloon without being asked. Maybe she was smarter than me. I followed her. Still don't know if it was the right choice. Only know I finally made one.
So tell me, partner, if you'd been in my boots that morning, holding a forged document and a borrowed name, would you have walked out into that street? Or would you have saddled up and kept riding? I'm still not sure I chose right. I'm just sure I finally chose.